Welcome to this tutorial on color grading and finishing in Premiere Pro. I will not teach you how to add effects and tweak parameters. I'm assuming you already know that. But I will show you how I used the color grading tools in Premiere Pro to grade my stuff. And hopefully you'll pick up a few tips that you can use when grading your stuff. Now in this clip, white balance is a little bit off. Of course, this shirt here should be white. And I want the blacks to be real black. So I added the RGB curves effect, and the blacks are quite easy. You just drag up or to the right to adjust the blacks on each color. I also added a slight S-curve to give everything a little bit more punch. And here are the levels for the red, green and blue channels. So to make the channels more even, I just dragged the upper right corner of each color to make everything match. And when I turn off the crop, you can see that the clip is pretty well balanced. This next clip didn't need much correction. You can see that the channels are a bit uneven and that the red channel is overexposed. So I dragged everything down and added an S-curve. And then I adjusted the blacks a bit. So I went from this to this. And of course the sky also gets a deeper blue color, which looks nice. I could have done this. I could have made the lighthouse more neutral. But I think it looks better when it's warm, getting closer to sunset and adding some cozy warm feeling to the clip. This one didn't get much correction either, I just added a slight S-curve. The S-curve adds contrast and makes the colors pop. And by the way, I never build these effects from scratch. Normally, people will do this. They add the effect, then start tweaking and adding points. But that takes much too long. Instead, I use presets. So this here is the slight S-curve preset, and boom, it's done. This clip needed more contrast, so I added a steeper S-curve, also a preset of course. This clip is a bit trickier. These people are not criminals, by the way. I just couldn't get hold of them all to ask permission to use the image, so I decided to blur the faces. I forgot to set the white balance inside this tent, so I ended up adding these strange curves to make everything more neutral. And then of course I copied and pasted the same settings to the rest of the clips in the same scene. When you do this much correction, you will lose some saturation. So I added a fast color corrector just to get some saturation back. And if you crop this and have a look at the skin tone only, we'll see that the skin color aligns pretty well with the skin tone line here. Now inside this cave I wanted the blacks to be really black. So I used the curves again. I crushed the blacks a little by dragging to the right. And I also added a curve to kind of make this entrance glow. And here you can see that the blacks are really black, and that the entrance has this nice glow. In this clip I could have added the curves effect to make the blacks more black and to get more detail in the white here. But I ended up not doing that. This is an abandoned soapstone factory, and I wanted to show that this dust from the stone has made everything light grey and white. And in this clip from a foggy day, I just added some saturation. It would have been tempting to do stuff like this to increase the contrast, but then it wouldn't look as much like a foggy day anymore. So I ended up just increasing saturation. Okay, that was primary color correction. Now let's have a look at secondary color correction. This image is slightly underexposed. So I added the curves effect to lighten it. I wanted the blue sky to be darker and more saturated. So I added the three-way color corrector. And this is set to secondary color correction so that the blue and the cyans only are affected. And the matte looks like this. So only this part of the image is adjusted. So that's basically what I did here. Here the forest makes everything look green, and the exposure is also too low. So again I added a curves adjustment, but I still wanted the forest to look green. So I added the three-way color corrector, and with this matte we can adjust the skin tones without affecting the rest of the image. So by dragging in the master color wheel, we can make the skin tones more natural. And with a temporary crop, you can see that the skin color aligns pretty well with the skin tone line again. Highly reflective clothes will often get oversaturated, like here. So again, I added a three-way color corrector, adjusting just this color. So I dragged the levels slightly down, and I also dragged the color wheel towards orange. Here's a tricky one. First, I wanted to get some more detail in the sky. So I added some highlight roll-off. This here is a preset I have, named Curves Highlight Roll-off. So when I need it, I just throw it on. Then I added a three-way color corrector to lower the levels of this yellow part here. And this second secondary color corrector is adjusted to affect only this orange. Okay, that's all well. But what if I need to change the settings over time? Well, some of these tools are keyframeable, but some, like the curves, they don't have keyframes, so we need to cheat. You just split the clip in two and have different corrections before and after the split. So this here is one clip cut in two with a cross dissolve between them, and of course with different corrections before and after the cut. Here's another one with no corrections on the first part and a curves adjustment on the second part. This is not just a clip, this is a nested sequence. And here's the sequence where I also added a mask. Here's the shot without any effects, and the white balance is way off. So I added a curves adjustment and also a crop, so I can see only this white area here. Then I added curves once more to make it darker. And this second layer has exactly the same settings, except from the second curves effect that makes things lighter, not darker. And of course on the top here is a layer with a blurred mask. And the mask of course is just a title made inside of Premiere Pro. This mask is fed into the track matte key, allowing me to make the image darker on the outside of the mask and lighter on the inside. So there you have it, keyframed curves. Here's something you have to fix once in a while. I've compensated for an iris adjustment during the recording. Again, I have different adjustments before and after. And a standard cross dissolve was too smooth here, so I keyframed opacity instead. So now the iris adjustment is much less visible. And now for my favorite part, using masks for secondary color correction. Most cameras can't capture all the dynamic range in an image like this, so you often end up with blown out sky. To fix this, I copy the layer and use a curves adjustment to bring the levels down. I also have a track matte key that takes its matte from track 3, and that's this mask here. It's easy to draw this mask with the pen tool, and when you're finished drawing, you need to change the graphics type to filled Bezier. This is pretty labor intensive, so the track matte key, the curves adjustment, and also the Gaussian blur on the matte, those are all presets. To fix an image like this, I will add the combined track matte and curves preset. The track matte key is already set to take its matte from layer 3, and the curves levels are already down to about 90%. Then I'll put the Gaussian blur preset on video layer 3, and it's already set to a decent blur and to repeat edges. I use the same technique on this shot, but the matte is more complicated. So instead of the blown out sky and the very dark shadows, we end up with something like this, with more detail both in the sky and in the shadows. I use the same technique here. And of course, this final result doesn't really look natural. You can see kind of glow around the edge of the matte here. But if I have to choose between this or this and this final result, my choice is clear. Another example using the same technique. Now you don't really have to draw the mask as detailed as this because it gets a decent amount of blur. I just wanted to show what's possible with this tool. And again, this is two different exposures on the same clip. One for the stave church and one for the sky. Here's a very useful fix using just one clip again. And the mask here is just a simple oval. And now I can make adjustment to the face area without affecting the rest of the image. And again, the mask is heavily blurred, so you don't really have to be accurate. Even if she moves a little, it'll be okay. But if you get bigger movements, then you have a problem. So here's a mask that's moving. The mask just follows the edge of the mountains. This is a nested sequence with two moving mats. But it's quite difficult to move the masks in the nested sequence because you can't really see what you're doing. So first I add them to the sequence with the image and animate them. And when the animation is done, I nest them into a new sequence. These masks, by the way, need to be bigger than the sequence because they're moving. So in the properties, you can see that these are 2000 times 1000 pixels, even though this is a 720p sequence. Vignettes are frequently used to darken the edges of the image. Here's a couple of ways to do that. This is just a title with an oval shape. The oval is white, but this particular title also has a black background. So it's white on black. So I just put this above the image, added some blur and lowered the opacity. Here's a more advanced technique using two copies of the same clip. The first layer has no effects. The second layer has Gaussian blur and a curves effect to make things darker. And of course, if you overdo the blur, you'll get some strange dreamy effects. And again, what makes all this work is the track matte key, and it takes this matte from video layer 3, the title. You can of course make this title any shape you want. And when you do changes, you can see it updates in the program monitor. Another useful technique, the blue sky fix. When the sky is blown out and you have no detail, you can make it look better. This title shape is filled with a gradient, and the gradient goes from dark blue to a lighter blue, and the lighter blue is also transparent. So it goes from dark blue to light blue transparent. I make the shape bigger than the image, so I can rotate it without hitting the edges. So I put this above the image on the timeline, and I set the blend mode to do something like linear burn, and I also lower the opacity. So without this fix, this guy looks pretty dull, but with the fix, it's a beautiful day. Because of the 8-bit linear capture on most cameras, these highlights are pretty much blown out, and also the edges are very sharp. It's pretty common to fix this by adding some blur to the highlights. We'll use our friend the curves again, and this time it's set to secondary color correction, keying out just the highlights. And it's also set to output just the mask. Then I added some blur, and if you want to, you can add another curves adjustment to make the highlights warmer. And of course the blend mode is set to screen, and now the highlights look much more pleasing. Sometimes patterns in the image will interfere with patterns in the camera, and you'll get moire. To fix that, you'll have to blur. But we don't want to blur the whole image, we just want to blur the part of the image where we get moire. So again, we'll use the track matte key, and the matte is a title inside of Premiere Pro. So we're blurring just the shirt and not the rest of the image. And now, sharpening. This image was shot from a distance, and the lens didn't perform well when zoomed all the way in. So first I added an S-curve to increase the contrast. Then some extra color. And then some sharpening. The unsharp mask. Unsharp mask is not CUDA accelerated, so you get a red render bar. This image needed some sharpening too. The camera was focused on this sign here, so the stave church in the background was a little bit blurry. And of course we could have used a combination of track matte key and the title to sharpen just the stave church. Okay, now for some scaling and cropping. These people are spraying concrete, so the camera has plastic on it. Unfortunately, some of the plastic can be seen in the upper right corner. So to get rid of the plastic, I scaled the clip and moved it a little. Another fix you'll use quite often, stabilizing. Now Premiere Pro has no built-in stabilizer, so we'll need to send the clip to After Effects. Here's an obviously handheld clip, and here's the stabilized version from After Effects. To stabilize, I just right-click the clip in Premiere Pro and choose Replace with After Effects Composition. I won't show that now because this is not an After Effects tutorial, but when it opens in After Effects you just add the warp stabilizer with the default settings, and when you go back to Premiere Pro, this is what you have. Here's another clip where the resulting camera movement is much smoother. Another thing we need to use After Effects for is noise reduction. This was shot with extra gain on the camera, so there's too much noise here. You can't really see that in the screen capture, but believe me, there is noise here. After Effects has great noise reduction tools. So again, we just right click, send the clip to After Effects and add noise reduction there. And back in Premiere Pro, the noise is gone. Noise reduction is very render intensive, so it will take a while. I also have some color correction on this clip, and I did not neutralize the colors. I just darkened the shadows a bit and added fat color corrector to increase saturation. I've seen video shot in this ice cave where the ice was white. But although the ice of course is white, the cave is lit by blue and green LED lights, so I want to keep that teal color. In this image, the noise was removed in a more complicated way. I have 2 copies of the clip and I have a matte. So I added some blur to just the sky. So this is dynamic link from After Effects with noise reduction. But I also added some blur to the sky only, using the track matte key and a title again. Some directors love letterboxing. And there's at least a couple of ways to do that. This one uses a title with 2 black bars. The other one here is just a crop. Just 2 different ways of doing it. I don't add letterboxing to each clip. Instead, I nest everything in a sequence and add letterboxing to the sequence. I've saved all the presets I've used in this tutorial as Jarle's grading tools, and I've made them available for download. And here's how to use them. Say we need to adjust skin color. Then we'll use this 3-way skin fix preset. It's already set to output the mask, and is set to adjust the master colors. All the secondary color correction controls are already twirled down, and they're tweaked to key out the skin tones only. So I only need to do minor tweaks here, and of course with some more tweaking you can get the key much better. And when you output full video, you can start tweaking the skin tones. Here's the familiar problem with the blown out sky. So I have 2 copies of the clip and a matte on the top. I know I need the track matte key and the curves, so these are both saved in a preset. Of course now you can see the edge of the matte, so we need to add the Gaussian blur preset to the matte. So with just 2 simple drag and drop operations, we've fixed this shot. And here's the blown out highlights problem, and these edges are too sharp, they don't look good. When we use this preset, it's already set to key out the highlights and to output the mask. So we just need to change the blending mode to screen and add some blur. Of course the blending mode and the blur could also be part of the preset, but I'll leave that to you. If your image needs more contrast, you have 2 S-curves to choose from. The standard S-curve is too much here, so we'll undo that and add the light S-curve. On this preset for sharpening, I haven't really done anything. It's just nice to have them in the same folder as the other finishing tools. When you need to do secondary color correction, you can use the preset that's already set to secondary correction. It's outputting the mask, and all the settings for secondary are twirled down. So first you need to do some color sampling. If you hold down Ctrl, you'll sample a larger area, 5 by 5 pixels. Now you can continue with the plus eyedropper, or you can tweak the hue, saturation and luma sliders. Starting with a preset like this will always be much faster than starting from scratch. Okay, let me switch to composite video and drag the saturation a bit down. And I would probably add some blur to the mask. Just a couple of pixels. On this particular clip, I would also add the highlight roll-off preset to get some more detail in the sky. So you can use all these presets as starters and make your color grading much quicker. When you import the presets, you'll get them in the preset folder. But I recommend having everything in the favorites folder and keep only that folder open during grading. Okay,